How did I even get here? That's the question spinning through my mind as my heart pounds against my ribcage like it's trying to escape. Bill Horace's office, all glass walls and marble floors, filled with that distinct scent of expensive cologne mixed with raw power. I'm just a junior assistant in this massive company, barely a blip on anyone's radar. And him? He's the CEO, the man everyone either fears or admires, sometimes both at once. But today is his birthday, and I've done something I never imagined I'd have the courage to do. Since this morning, I've been carrying around this secret plan. A small gift, something personal that came straight from my heart. I found this vintage fountain pen in an antique shop downtown. Elegant, understated, perfectly matching the quiet intensity he carries himself with. But actually handing it to him face to face? That level of bravery doesn't exist in my vocabulary. So I waited, watching the clock tick painfully slow until everyone finally headed out for their lunch break. The moment the office floor emptied out, I made my move. My footsteps felt too loud against the polished tiles as I crept toward his corner office. Even though I knew nobody was around to hear them, my heartbeat drummed so loudly in my ears that I was convinced someone would somehow detect it, come running, ask what the junior assistant was doing sneaking into the CEO's private space. I placed the wrapped box carefully on his massive desk, my hands trembling slightly as I positioned it just right. Next to it, I set down a small handwritten note on cream-colored cardstock. Happy birthday, Mr. Horace. Hope this brings you as much clarity as you bring to everyone around you. Simple. Anonymous enough. Safe. I turned toward the door, ready to slip out and pretend this never happened. When the handle suddenly turned. Jude. His voice hit me like a physical force, rooting me to the spot. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Slowly, painfully slowly, I turned around to face the consequences of my impulsive decision. Bill stood in the doorway, his suit jacket draped casually over one arm, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. That look in his eyes, the one I could never quite decipher, pinned me in place. It was serious, commanding, but somewhere beneath that corporate exterior, I caught a glimpse of something softer. Mr. Horace. I was just, the words tangled in my throat, coming out as an embarrassing stutter. Sneaking out of my office? He raised one eyebrow, and though his tone held a question, there wasn't any anger in it, just pure curiosity, like he'd stumbled upon something unexpectedly intriguing. My hand flew to my nose, touching the tip, an old nervous habit I've never managed to break. I didn't want to make things weird or uncomfortable. Thought it would be easier to just leave it here quietly. You thought leaving an anonymous gift would be less awkward than simply handing it to me directly. He moved further into the room, each step deliberate and measured. My throat constricted, words evaporating before they could form. Bill walked to his desk and picked up the wrapped box, his fingers tracing over it with unexpected reverence, like it was something incredibly precious rather than just a simple pen. Nobody has ever given me anything like this before, he said, and I caught that strange vulnerability creeping into his voice that seemed completely at odds with his powerful position. It's really nothing special, sir. Just a small. I tried to downplay it, tried to make myself smaller. It is special, he interrupted, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. Because you're the one who gave it to me. I forgot how to breathe. The air in the room felt thick, charged with something I didn't have words for. Then he moved even closer, so close I could pick up the subtle scent of his cologne, cedarwood and something else, something addictive that made my head spin. The professional distance between boss and employee evaporated in that small space between us. You should have stayed, Jude, he said, his voice dropping to something low and intimate. My pulse kicked into overdrive, racing so fast I felt dizzy. Why? The word came out barely above a whisper, my voice betraying every emotion I'd tried so hard to keep hidden. Bill's lips curved into the smallest smile, barely there but enough to send my stomach into flips. Because now I want to know what else you've been hiding from me. The implication hung in the air between us, heavy and impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about a birthday gift anymore. This was about all those glances I thought he hadn't noticed. All those times I'd stayed late making sure his schedule ran smoothly. All those moments I told myself meant nothing. I should have said something professional. Should have created distance. Should have remembered my place. But I just stood there, trapped in his gaze, wondering if he could hear my heart hammering against my ribs. I should go, I finally managed to say, though my feet didn't move. Let you get back to your day. Jude. The way he said my name felt different now. Intimate somehow. Thank you. Truly. I nodded, not trusting my voice anymore, and somehow forced myself to walk toward the door. Each step felt like moving through water, heavy and resistant. Just as I reached the threshold, his voice stopped me one more time. And Jude? This conversation isn't over. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. Instead, I just kept walking, my legs carrying me back to my tiny cubicle on autopilot while my brain tried to process what had just happened. Enya looked up from her desk as I passed, her eyes sharp and knowing. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Fine, I lied, sliding into my chair and staring blankly at my computer screen. Totally fine. But I wasn't fine. Everything had shifted in those few minutes in his office. The careful boundaries I'd maintained, the professional distance I'd convinced myself was enough. All of it had crumbled with just a few words and that devastating smile. My phone sat on my desk. Screen dark, but I kept glancing at it like it might suddenly explode. What did he mean the conversation wasn't over? What else could there possibly be to say? I tried to focus on work, pulling up spreadsheets and reports that suddenly seemed completely meaningless. The numbers blurred together as my mind replayed every second of that encounter. His expression when he saw the gift, the way he'd moved closer, how his voice had changed when he said my name. The rest of the afternoon crawled by in agonizing slow motion. Every notification made me jump. Every footstep in the hallway had me tensing up, wondering if it was him coming to continue whatever had started in his office. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, I was exhausted from the emotional whiplash. I packed up my things quickly, desperate to escape to the safety of my apartment where I could finally process everything without fear of running into him in the elevator. But as I waited for the doors to close, a hand caught them at the last second. Bill stepped inside, and suddenly the spacious elevator felt impossibly small. The next morning I gave myself a firm talking to before even getting out of bed. Be normal, Jude. Be professional. Yesterday was nothing. Just a brief moment that you're blowing completely out of proportion because you have a stupid, impossible crush on your boss. I repeated this mantra during my entire commute, willing myself to believe it. The moment I settled into my cubicle and powered up my computer, my phone vibrated against the desk. The message on the screen made my heart stop. My office. 10 o'clock. I stared at those words like they were a death sentence. What's wrong with you? Anya leaned over the partition separating our desks, her voice dropping to a concerned whisper. You look absolutely terrified. Did something happen? Nothing happened, I said, but my voice lacked any conviction whatsoever. Jude, you're a terrible liar. You know that, right? She studied my face with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. Seriously, what's going on? I just have a meeting, I said vaguely, turning back to my computer and pretending to be very interested in my email inbox. Enya didn't push further, but I could feel her watching me with concern as the minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. When 10 o'clock finally arrived, I forced myself to stand up, smooth down my shirt and head toward the elevator. My reflection in the polished metal doors showed someone who looked far more composed than I felt inside. The executive floor always felt different. Quieter, more serious. Like even the air carried more weight up here. I approached Bill's office, my professional mask firmly in place, and knocked twice. Enter. His voice called from inside, smooth and authoritative. I stepped through the doorway. Bill sat behind his enormous desk. Laptop open in front of him, but his complete attention focused on me the moment I appeared. The intensity of his gaze made my carefully constructed composure start to crack. Close the door and sit down, he instructed, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. I obeyed, settling into the chair and clasping my hands together in my lap to keep them from shaking. The office felt too quiet, too intimate, despite its professional setting. How long have you worked for this company, Jude? Bill asked, leaning back in his chair with deceptive casualness. 8 months, sir. I answered promptly, grateful for the straightforward question. 8 months, he repeated, as if considering this information carefully. And during that time, did it occur to you that I might actually notice you? The question caught me completely off guard. Notice me? I'm just one of dozens of assistants, sir. I don't think you fixed my calendar 3 weeks ago when Sarah double-booked my afternoon. He interrupted, his eyes never leaving my face. You rearranged the quarterly reports so they actually made chronological sense. You've been quietly ensuring my meetings never overlap with the board luncheons. Even though that's not remotely your responsibility. My mouth went dry. He'd noticed all of that. Bill stood up and moved toward the window, hands sliding into his pockets as he gazed out at the city below. I notice everything that happens in this company, Jude, especially when someone goes out of their way to make things run more smoothly without ever asking for recognition. I was just trying to be helpful, I said weakly. It's part of doing a good job. He turned to face me and something in his expression had shifted. Why do you work so hard to remain invisible? The question hit deeper than I expected. I'm not trying to be invisible. I do my work and go home. That's normal. There's nothing normal about someone with your capabilities deliberately staying in the background. Bill countered. You're better than the position you're in. Smarter. More efficient. So why haven't you applied for advancement? Because advancing means being seen, and being seen means being vulnerable. I thought but didn't say aloud. I'm comfortable where I am. Comfortable, he echoed. Like the word tasted wrong. Or hiding? Before I could formulate a response, he moved back to his desk. But this time he didn't sit. Instead, he perched on the edge, close enough that I had to tilt my head up to maintain eye contact. The shift in dynamics made my breath catch. I have a proposition for you, Bill said, his voice taking on that commanding tone that made people listen. I want you as my personal assistant. Direct report to me, handling my schedule, my meetings, my priorities. I genuinely choked on air. What? Sir? I can't possibly. This isn't a negotiation, Jude. He cut me off smoothly. I need someone I can depend on completely. Someone smart enough to anticipate problems before they arise. Someone I can trust without question. He paused, letting those words sink in. For reasons I'm still analyzing, I trust you. My heart hammered so hard I worried he could see it through my shirt. This wasn't just a promotion. This was a complete upheaval of everything I'd carefully built. Working directly with him, being in his space constantly. Having no buffer between us. I don't understand why you'd choose me. I admitted, my voice coming out smaller than intended. There are people with more experience, better qualifications. I don't want them, Bill stated simply. I want you. The weight of those 3 words settled over me like a blanket. I want you. In a professional context, obviously, but something about the way he said it made my skin warm. This is a significant opportunity, he continued, sensing my hesitation. Better salary, better benefits, direct exposure to executive-level decision-making. It's a career accelerator. Can I think about it? I asked, though we both knew what my answer would be. No. His response was immediate and unapologetic. I need your answer right now. The directness should have annoyed me. Instead, it sent a strange thrill through my system. He wasn't playing games or giving me time to talk myself out of it. He was forcing me to decide in this moment, with nothing but instinct to guide me. Yes, I heard myself say before my rational brain could interfere. Yes, I'll take the position. Something shifted in Bill's expression, a subtle relaxation around his eyes, a barely there smile. Good. You start Monday. Sarah will brief you on the transition details. Monday? I repeated faintly. That's only 4 days away. Plenty of time, he assured me, finally moving back behind his desk. You're dismissed. And Jude? I paused halfway to standing. Yes, sir. Stop calling me sir when we're alone. Bill is fine. The informal request sent another wave of confusion and something dangerously close to hope through me. That seems inappropriate given our new working relationship. Perhaps, he agreed, picking up his pen with a slight smirk. But I don't particularly care about conventional appropriateness. Do you? I fled his office without answering, because the honest response would have been far too revealing. My first official day as Bill's personal assistant felt like being thrown into deep water without knowing how to swim. The work itself wasn't impossibly difficult. I'd been handling complex tasks for months. What overwhelmed me was the constant proximity to him. Every meeting, every decision, every moment of his professional day now included me sitting beside him. taking notes, offering input when requested. The morning started with back-to-back conference calls. I sat in the small chair positioned near his desk, laptop balanced on my knees, typing furiously to keep up with the rapid-fire discussions about quarterly projections and market expansions. Bill conducted business with effortless authority, his voice never rising but somehow commanding absolute attention from everyone on the line. I found myself stealing glances at him between notes, the way he tapped his pen against his desk when thinking, how his jaw tightened when someone said something he disagreed with but was too polite to interrupt. "Jude, pull up the Henderson contract details," he said suddenly during a brief pause in the conversation. I fumbled with my laptop, fingers clumsy with nerves, but managed to locate the file and angle the screen so he could see it. His hand brushed against mine as he adjusted the laptop, and even that brief contact sent electricity up my arm. "Focus," I ordered myself sternly. "This is just work. Professional work." By the time lunch rolled around, I desperately needed a break from the intensity of being in his presence. I escaped to the small kitchenette on the executive floor, determined to make coffee and gather my scattered thoughts. I'd barely poured my first cup when Anya appeared in the doorway, arms crossed and expression determined. "Okay, explain," she demanded without preamble. "How exactly did you become the CEO's right hand overnight? Because this doesn't happen through normal channels, Jude," he offered. "I accepted," I said, aiming for casual and missing by a mile. "Sometimes opportunities just present themselves." "Stop deflecting," Anya pressed, stepping closer and lowering her voice. "Everyone's talking about it, the sudden promotion, the closed-door meetings. People are starting to speculate." "Speculate what?" I asked, though dread was already pooling in my stomach. She gave me a long look. "You really don't see it? The way he looks at you isn't exactly subtle. You're imagining things," I said quickly. Too quickly. "He values competent employees. That's all this is." Anya didn't look convinced, but she mercifully changed the subject. "Just be careful, okay? Office politics are brutal, especially at this level. And when the CEO shows someone special attention, people notice. People talk." Her warning echoed in my head as I returned to Bill's office, finding him reviewing documents with a slight frown creasing his forehead. "Everything all right?" I ventured, settling back into my workspace. "Fine. Just dealing with another supplier issue," he muttered, then looked up at me. "Actually, I have a business dinner tonight at Meridian. High-profile clients. I need you there to take notes and observe the dynamics." A business dinner at Meridian, one of those exclusive rooftop restaurants where reservations required weeks of advance notice and the prices made my head spin. "Of course," I agreed, because what else could I say? "What time should I be there?" "7. I'll have Marcus send you the address." He paused, studying me with that unsettling intensity. "This isn't typical assistant work, I know. But these clients are crucial and I value your judgment. I want your read on them." The fact that he trusted my judgment enough to include me in something this important should have felt purely professional. Instead, it felt personal, intimate in a way that made my pulse quicken. That evening, I changed into the nicest outfit I owned, dark slacks and a button-down that hopefully looked expensive enough for the venue. Standing in front of my bathroom mirror, I gave myself another stern lecture about maintaining boundaries and remembering my place. It didn't help much. Meridian exceeded every expectation. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city. Soft lighting created an atmosphere of quiet luxury and every detail screamed refined elegance. Bill arrived moments after me, looking unfairly attractive in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. He'd loosened his tie slightly, and something about that small imperfection made him seem more human, more accessible. "Ready?" he asked, gesturing toward the private dining area where our clients waited. The dinner itself passed in a blur of polite conversation and subtle business negotiations. I took careful notes, observing the dynamics just as Bill had requested. The clients, a married couple who owned a major distribution network, clearly respected Bill, but they were cautious, weighing every word before committing to anything concrete. As the meal wound down and the clients excused themselves to take a phone call, Bill leaned back in his chair and looked at me properly for the first time all evening. "Well, your assessment?" "They're interested but hesitant," I said, grateful he was asking my opinion. The wife is the real decision maker, even though the husband does most of the talking. She's been watching numbers, asking strategic questions disguised as casual conversation. Bill's expression shifted into something approaching impressed. You caught all that? It wasn't particularly subtle once you knew to look for it. I replied with a slight shrug. Most people never bother to look, he countered. You're observant, Jude. That's rare. The compliment warmed me more than it should have. We fell into comfortable silence, and for a moment it felt less like boss and employee and more like something else. Something I didn't dare name. When we finally left the restaurant, the night air was cool against my skin. Bill walked beside me toward the parking area, his presence both comforting and unnerving. You did well tonight, he said as we reached his car. Thank you for coming. Just doing my job, I deflected, though my heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with professional duty. Right. Your job. Something flickered across his expression, disappointment maybe, or frustration. Get home safely, Jude. He climbed into his car and drove away, leaving me standing there wondering what I'd said wrong. The ride home gave me too much time to think about Anya's warnings, about the way Bill looked at me sometimes, about how this job was already blurring lines I'd promised myself I'd never cross. I was playing with fire, I realized. Bill Horace wasn't just my boss. He was successful, powerful, completely out of my league in every conceivable way. Whatever I thought I sensed between us was probably just wishful thinking on my part, my brain interpreting professional interest as something more because I wanted it to be. By the time I collapsed into bed that night, exhaustion weighing down my limbs, I'd convinced myself to be more careful, to maintain appropriate distance, to stop reading into every glance and word. But even as I drifted off to sleep, my last thought was of his smile when I'd accepted the job, and how it had made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely invisible after all. A full week passed, and I'd become Bill's shadow. Morning strategy sessions, client presentations, late-night contract reviews. We moved through each day like a well-oiled machine. Professionally, we were seamless, but personally, the tension stretched tighter with each passing hour, built from lingering glances and words we both refused to speak aloud. Friday night found us alone in the office long after everyone else had gone home. The building felt different after hours. Quieter, more intimate somehow. I was organizing quarterly reports at my desk when Bill emerged from his office looking thoroughly exhausted. His tie hung loose around his neck, the top 3 buttons of his shirt undone, sleeves pushed up carelessly to his elbows. Despite the obvious fatigue, his eyes held a softness I'd only seen during these stolen late-night moments. That's enough for tonight, he said, his voice gentle but leaving no room for argument. It's nearly midnight, Jude. Almost finished with these, I protested, not looking up from the documents spread across my desk. Leave them. He moved closer, standing beside my desk now. Come on. We're both going home. I reluctantly stacked the papers and stood, stretching my stiff shoulders. You need proper rest. You haven't slept more than 4 hours a night all week, and you think you've done any better. He reached out, his fingertips barely grazing my cheek. Such a light touch, yet it froze me completely in place and made breathing suddenly difficult. You're always taking care of me, making sure I eat, managing my impossible schedule, but who's looking after you? I stepped back instinctively, my heart hammering against my ribs. I can take care of myself just fine. You say that constantly, Bill said, frustration creeping into his tone as his jaw tightened. Why do you do that? Do what? My defensive walls shot up immediately. Push away anyone who tries to get closer than arm's length. The observation hit too accurately for comfort. I went silent, unable to formulate a denial that wouldn't be an obvious lie. I'm not trying to... I started weakly. Yes, you absolutely are, he interrupted, catching my wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough to make me turn and face him properly. Look at me when I'm talking to you. I forced myself to meet his eyes. They held concern, frustration, and something else I couldn't quite identify, but that made my chest feel too tight. I'm terrible at this, I whispered, my voice betraying how shaken I felt. At opening up to people, at trusting they won't eventually leave once they really see me. Then let me be different, Bill said, his voice dropping to something impossibly soft yet determined. Let me show you that I'm not going anywhere, Jude. My heart felt like it was simultaneously breaking and healing itself. But then his phone shattered the moment with its loud ringtone. Bill glanced at the screen and I caught the name before he could hide it. Charlotte? I immediately pulled away. The spell broken. Answer it. It's nobody important, he said dismissively, silencing the call. She's called at least 3 times today, I pointed out, trying to sound casual even as jealousy twisted in my gut. Seems important to me. Jude, listen. Frustration colored his voice now. Really, it's fine. I lied, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. I should head home anyway. Good night, Bill. I grabbed my bag and fled before he could stop me, because staying even one more second would have shattered whatever composure I had left. Questions I couldn't ask burned in my throat. Who was Charlotte really? Why did she have such easy access to him? And the one that hurt most, where did I actually stand in his life? At home, I collapsed onto my bed fully clothed. But sleep remained elusive. Bill's face kept appearing behind my closed eyelids. His gentle eyes, that feather-light touch on my cheek. The frustration in his voice when I'd run away, and threaded through all of it. Charlotte's name blinked like a neon warning sign I'd been too blind to see. The next morning, I'd barely stepped into the office lobby when the receptionist stopped me with an uncertain smile. Excuse me, Jude? There's someone here to see you. She's waiting by the elevators. Confused, I turned toward the elevator bank and stopped dead. A woman stood there and stunning didn't begin to cover it. Her designer dress fit like it had been made specifically for her body. Expensive heels added elegant height, and her makeup was absolutely flawless. But it was the confidence radiating from every line of her posture that really commanded attention. The moment she spotted me, she smiled bright and cold simultaneously, like sun glinting off ice. You must be Jude, she said warmly. Yes, I answered cautiously. And you are? Charlotte. She extended her hand smoothly, her smile sharpening at the edges. Bill's fiancée. The word hit me like a physical blow. Fiancé. It echoed through my skull, drowning out every other thought. Oh, I managed, forcing my face into something resembling a smile, though it felt grotesque. It's nice to meet you. Her handshake was uncomfortably firm, her grip just slightly too tight. Bill mentions you quite frequently these days, she continued, her tone syrupy sweet. I decided I should meet the person who's been spending so much time with my fiancé lately. The emphasis on my fiancé wasn't subtle. Understanding crashed over me with crystal clarity. This wasn't a friendly introduction. This was a warning shot, a declaration of territory. And I was the threat she'd come to neutralize. I was just an assistant who'd forgotten where the boundaries were supposed to be. I should get to work, I said, extracting my hand from hers. Excuse me. I made it to my desk somehow, though my legs felt unsteady and my hands trembled as I set down my bag. Fiancé. The word played on repeat like a broken record in my mind. Of course Bill had someone. He was successful, powerful, attractive. Why wouldn't he have an established relationship? And me? I was just an employee who'd misread professional kindness as personal interest. All those moments I'd treasured were probably nothing but my imagination painting meaning where none existed. My phone rang. Bill's extension. My stomach dropped. Come to my office immediately, his voice said, flat and emotionless in a way I'd never heard before. The walk to his office felt like marching toward execution. When I entered, he stood at the window with his back to me, posture rigid and tense. Charlotte mentioned she met you, he said without turning around, his voice tight. Yes, sir, I replied, deliberately formal. Don't call me that, he snapped, finally turning to face me. His expression was angry, but somehow the anger didn't seem directed at me. How many times do we need to have this conversation? I stayed silent, completely confused by his reaction. Listen very carefully, he began, then stopped, running his hand through his hair in obvious agitation. You need to understand something about Charlotte. You don't owe me explanations about your personal life, I interrupted quickly, trying to maintain some shred of professionalism even as my voice shook. I'm just your assistant. What you do outside this office isn't my business. She was my personal life, Bill corrected sharply, almost desperately. Past tense, was. As in no longer. I froze, not daring to hope. What do you mean? Charlotte and I were engaged, he explained, stepping closer and clearly struggling with frustration and something more vulnerable. 2 years ago, it ended badly. Definitively. But she refuses to accept that it's over and keeps inserting herself back into my life. My heart cautiously leaned toward hope, though I was terrified to trust it. Then why does she still call herself your fiancé? I asked quietly. Because she's delusional, Bill said bitterly. And because she saw how different I am around you and immediately recognized you as a threat to whatever reconciliation fantasy she's constructed in her head. Me? A threat? The words came out broken, almost laughing. I'm nobody. Stop, he interrupted, suddenly gripping my shoulders gently, but firmly enough to make me meet his eyes. Stop diminishing yourself. You're not nobody, Jude. You're everything I didn't realize I was missing until you appeared in my life. I forgot how to breathe. Bill. His name fell from my lips barely above a whisper, my voice thick with emotions I couldn't name. I know how complicated this is, he continued, his voice dropping lower, more intimate. I know the power dynamic is problematic. I know crossing this line violates every professional boundary that exists. But I can't keep pretending there's nothing between us. I stood completely speechless. Because this was simultaneously exactly what I'd wanted and what terrified me most. I don't know what you expect me to say, I admitted honestly, my voice cracking slightly under the weight of it all. Then don't say anything yet, Bill murmured, leaning closer until his forehead nearly touched mine, his breath warm against my face. Just stay here with me. Not as my assistant, not because of work obligations. Just as yourself. Just as Jude. Tears welled unexpectedly in my eyes. Happy, scared, overwhelmed tears all mixing together until I couldn't distinguish one from another. I'm terrified, I confessed shakily. Of this. Of you. Of what happens if we cross this line and it doesn't work. I'm terrified too, Bill admitted with raw honesty, his hands coming up to gently cup my face. But being scared with you feels better than being safe and empty without you. Then I honestly couldn't say who moved first. His lips found mine. The kiss was soft, questioning, hesitant, like he was still asking permission even now. I kissed him back, tentatively at first, then with all the pent-up emotion of the past weeks. In that single moment, everything else faded away. Charlotte, office politics, my fears, all of it disappeared into insignificance. When we finally pulled apart, I was smiling. Genuinely, truly smiling in a way I hadn't in longer than I could remember. So we're really doing this? I asked nervously. Hopefully. Bill laughed softly, his thumb brushing across my cheek with impossible tenderness. If you're willing to take this risk with me. You're an idiot, I muttered affectionately, though I was blushing furiously. Obviously I'm willing. The happiness lasted approximately 10 minutes. I'd barely returned to my desk when my phone buzzed with a text from Anya. Emergency. Charlotte's spreading vicious rumors about you. Everyone's talking. Be careful. My stomach sank as reality crashed back down. Charlotte wasn't going to accept defeat gracefully. She was going to make this ugly, and I was directly in her crosshairs. By Monday morning, the damage was already catastrophic. Whispers followed me through the office hallways. People who'd been friendly last week now avoided eye contact. I caught fragments of conversations that stopped abruptly when I approached. Did you hear? Jude and the CEO, he's a homewrecker. Destroyed an engagement. Obviously slept his way into that promotion. That's how it works with people like him. I tried desperately to ignore it, but words cut deep, especially malicious lies built on twisted partial truths. Bill was absolutely furious when he learned what was happening. He immediately called an emergency HR meeting and made it crystal clear that workplace harassment and gossip would result in termination. But the damage was already done. People looked at me differently now, with suspicion and judgment in their eyes. During lunch, I deliberately chose a quiet corner of the cafeteria, hoping to avoid everyone. Charlotte found me anyway. She sat down across from me uninvited. Her smile plastic but her eyes cold as ice. Having fun with all the attention you're getting? I'm not doing anything, I said calmly, despite my racing pulse. You started all of this. Please, she laughed dismissively. You don't have to actively do anything. Your mere existence near him causes enough damage. Being whatever it is you think you are to him. This was calculated, wasn't it? I asked quietly but firmly. Spreading rumors. Destroying my reputation. Manipulating everyone's perception? Charlotte shrugged carelessly. I'm simply reminding everyone, and especially reminding you, that Bill and I share real history. Years of meaningful history. You're just a temporary distraction. He's going through a phase that will pass. If that's genuinely true, I said, keeping my voice surprisingly steady, then why are you so obviously threatened? Why go through all this effort if I'm so insignificant? Her confident smile faltered visibly for just a second. I stood up, done with this conversation entirely. You lost him, Charlotte. Not because of me, not because of anyone else interfering. You lost him because of your own actions and choices. I walked away calmly, my heart pounding violently but my head held high for the first time since this nightmare began. That evening, Bill brought me to his private penthouse. Not for work, just for us. To be together away from everything else. We sat on his spacious balcony, with the city lights glowing beautifully far below. He handed me wine and we settled into comfortable silence. The kind that feels safe and natural. I'm sorry, Bill finally said softly. For what specifically? For pulling you into my complicated mess. For failing to protect you better from Charlotte's vindictiveness. I immediately shook my head. You didn't pull me anywhere. I chose this path knowingly. I chose you, fully aware of the potential consequences. Bill really looked at me then, deeply, searchingly, and then smiled genuinely. Vulnerably. Beautifully. You know what's ironic? He said thoughtfully. I spent years deliberately building walls around myself, making absolutely certain nobody got close enough to matter, and then you appeared with your nervous habits and thoughtful gestures and just walked straight through every single barrier like they were made of paper. I laughed softly. That definitely wasn't intentional. I know, he said, reaching over to carefully lace our fingers together. That's exactly why it worked. That's why you succeeded where everyone else failed. We sat there holding hands, watching the endless city, feeling genuinely safe and complete. What happens now? I eventually asked. With Charlotte, the rumors, the office situation? Now? Bill gently pulled me closer, wrapping his arm protectively around me. Now we face it together. As partners. As equals. I leaned into him completely, feeling his steady heartbeat against my back, surrounded by his warmth. Together, I whispered, finally believing it was possible. In that perfect moment, everything genuinely felt okay. Charlotte's schemes, the ruthless judgment, the spreading rumors, all of it temporarily faded into background noise. Because this moment was real. Solid. We were real. Bill pressed a tender kiss to the top of my head. Thank you for everything, Jude. For what exactly? For staying when running would have been easier. For choosing me despite the cost. For being brave when I know you're absolutely terrified. I smiled, closing my eyes peacefully, feeling safe for perhaps the first time in years. Always, I whispered back, meaning every single word. I'll always and for the first time in my entire life, I genuinely believed in something bigger than my fears. Because Bill had given me things I'd never consciously asked for. Complete acceptance, emotional safety, and real, unconditional love. I finally truly understood this wasn't an ending. This was our beginning. Our real story was just starting. The following weeks tested us in ways I hadn't anticipated. Charlotte's rumors had done their damage, but something unexpected happened. People started actually observing rather than just gossiping. They saw how Bill treated me, how our professional relationship functioned, how I genuinely earned my position through competence rather than whatever sordid story Charlotte had manufactured. Slowly, painfully slowly, the whispers began shifting. Have you seen Jude's presentation on the Morrison account? It was actually brilliant. He reorganized the entire filing system and saved us hundreds of hours. Maybe there's more to the story than we thought. Bill never publicly acknowledged our relationship. That would have been inappropriate and possibly damaging to both our careers. But he didn't hide his respect for my work, either. Every meeting where I contributed ideas, every project I successfully managed, every problem I solved became its own quiet rebuttal to Charlotte's narrative. Enya cornered me one afternoon in the break room, her expression serious. So are you going to tell me what's actually happening, or do I have to keep guessing? What do you mean? I hedged, buying time. Jude, we've been friends long enough. I know when you're hiding something major. She crossed her arms. And I've watched you transform over the past month. You're different, happier, more confident. So either therapy is working miracles, or something else is going on. I considered deflecting again, then decided she deserved honesty. Bill and I were involved. Personally involved. It's complicated and probably inadvisable, but it's real. Instead of shock or judgment, Anya just nodded slowly. I figured, the way he looks at you isn't exactly subtle to anyone actually paying attention. She paused. Are you happy? The question surprised me. Yes. Terrified. But yes. Then that's what matters, she said simply. Just be careful. Charlotte seems like the type to escalate if she feels cornered. That warning proved prophetic. 2 days later, I arrived at work to find my security access deactivated. When I called security, they informed me there had been irregularities with my clearance that needed HR review. Bill was in back-to-back meetings all morning. Unreachable. I sat in the lobby for 3 hours, feeling humiliated as colleagues passed by with pitying or curious glances. When Bill finally emerged and learned what happened, his fury was ice-cold and terrifying. Within 30 minutes he'd uncovered that someone had filed a fraudulent complaint about me accessing restricted files. The digital trail led directly back to Charlotte's personal email account. She's done, Bill said flatly when he explained it to me in his office that evening. I've contacted legal. She's facing potential charges for corporate sabotage and harassment. Bill, I don't want to cause more problems. I started. You didn't cause anything, he interrupted firmly. She did this to herself. I've been patient. I've been polite. I've tried to handle this quietly out of respect for what we once had. But she crossed a line when she came after you professionally. The protective anger in his voice made my heart clench. What happens now? Now she faces consequences. Legal ones. He ran his hand through his hair. Exhaustion evident. I should have done this months ago when she first started her campaign. I kept hoping she'd eventually accept reality and move on. That was naive. You were trying to be kind, I said softly. I was being cowardly, he corrected. I didn't want the confrontation, so I kept avoiding it. Meanwhile, she escalated. And you paid the price for my avoidance. He looked at me with genuine regret. I'm sorry, Jude. Stop apologizing for her actions, I said. You're not responsible for her choices. He pulled me into an embrace and I let myself melt into it, drawing strength from his solid presence. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Charlotte had made enough mistakes. The digital trail, witnesses to her harassment, documented evidence of her spreading false information that her lawyer advised her to settle. The settlement included a restraining order and a non-disparagement clause that effectively silenced her. The office gossip finally died down as people moved on to fresher scandals. Gradually, my reputation rebuilt itself through actual work rather than speculation about my personal life. 3 months after that first kiss, Bill and I fell into a comfortable rhythm. We were careful at work, professional, appropriate, maintaining clear boundaries. But outside the office, we built something real and solid and deeply meaningful. He learned that I touched my nose when nervous, that I secretly loved terrible reality TV shows, that I'd always wanted to learn piano but never had time. I learned that he was terrified of failure despite appearing invincible, that he'd wanted to be an architect before family pressure pushed him toward business, that he collected vintage books but never admitted it because he thought it seemed pretentious. We had our first real fight about something completely mundane, whether to order Thai or Italian food, and learned how to disagree without destroying each other. We navigated the complicated logistics of dating your boss, including when to disclose the relationship officially to HR and how to handle any concerns about favoritism. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated and sometimes frustrating, but it was ours. One evening, 6 months into our relationship, we sat on his balcony again. Our spot we'd started calling it. The city glittered below us. The same view as that first night. But everything felt different now. Settled. Sir, do you ever regret it? Bill asked suddenly. Taking that risk with me? Dealing with everything that came after? I considered the question seriously. There are moments I wish it had been easier. I wish Charlotte hadn't made everything so ugly. I wish people had been kinder. I turned to look at him directly. But regret? Never. Not for a single second. His expression softened impossibly. I was worried you might, given everything you endured because of me. Because of Charlotte, I corrected. Not because of you. There's a difference. You always make that distinction, he observed. Because it's important, I insisted. You didn't create those problems. You just dealt with them. With me. We dealt with them. Together. Together, he echoed, pulling me closer. I liked the sound of that. Me too, I admitted, settling against his chest and listening to his heartbeat, steady, reliable, constant. We sat in comfortable silence, and I realized something important. This feeling, this peace, this safety, this certainty, this was what I'd been missing my entire life. Not the grand romantic gestures or dramatic declarations, but this quiet confidence that someone chose me. Every day, despite everything. Because of everything. I love you, Bill said quietly. The first time either of us had spoken those specific words. I smiled against his chest. I love you too. Even when you're being stubborn about ordering Italian. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. We're never letting that go, are we? Absolutely not, I confirmed. And sitting there, wrapped in each other and the city lights and the certainty of us, I finally understood what people meant when they talked about home. It wasn't a place. It was this. It was him. It was us. Together. Building something that was messy and imperfect and absolutely worth every risk we'd taken to get here. This was our story. And it was only just beginning.